Today we welcome Daniela Rohrbach-Schmidt, who is a senior researcher at the German Federal Institute for Vocational Education and Training. She holds a PhD in sociology from the University of Cologne in Germany. Her research focuses on vocational education and training, occupations, and social inequality. And today she will present her recent work, Tasks, Personality and Wages, an empirical analysis for Germany. Thank you for coming, Daniela, and you may start.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. I think LabFem is a very interesting research center with many interesting projects, and I will continue to look at the progress of the center in the future. And yes, Honorata, we had some contact in advance on the German task data, and yes, the research of today is also on job tasks, even though at the moment I mainly work on occupational prestige and the segmentation of the vocational education and training market. But nevertheless, the job task theme is of immense importance for labor markets, and so it's also important for vocational education and training. So we, as you know, have these employment data in Germany which collect these task information, and the paper I present today is a joint work with Christian Ebner from the Technical University Braunschweig, which is a sociologist as well. Sabine Krüger, who is, I think, also here today joining the seminar. She's a PhD student, and she works also on task, but also on occupational prestige. And maybe she will assist me in the discussion because she also worked intensively on this paper in the past. And the fourth co-author is Caroline Wehner, who is also at BIP, but also affiliated with the Institute of Labor Economics in Germany, the ITSA. And she also worked on selection into job tasks with a recruiter survey, a paper which we cite in this paper, which is quite interesting. So the paper I'm going to talk about, you also mentioned it, is entitled Task, Personality and Wages, an Empirical Analysis for Germany. And I plan to talk for about half an hour, but please interrupt me at any time if there are questions or comments.
Thank you, Daniela. Yeah, so you can talk in a relaxed way, 30 or even longer time, no problem.
Okay, thank you. So what's the background in the paper? Most of you are surely very familiar with this context. What we see is that wage inequality has increased in recent years, and on the demand side, we have this immense technological change that leads to an increasing demand for analytical tasks on the one hand and interactive tasks, and a decreasing demand for routine tasks. And the task approach literature has shown that this change in the demand for skills and in employment also leads to effects on wages. On the side of supply side factors, a really huge amount of studies show that individual human capital is relevant for wages as well. But in the last couple of years, in sociology and also in economics, studies have increasingly focused on the role of personality traits for labor market success and wages. Comparatively little research has being conducted on the interplay of both these factors. Even though in practice, wages clearly are determined by an interaction between supply and demand factors. In this context, personality traits may be important because combined with tasks, they may exert significant effects on wages. There are a couple of studies on this, but typically these studies either cover a reduced number of big 5 personality traits, for example, or other traits and job tasks, or they use aggregated task information on the occupation level to analyze this relationship. Our study aims to contribute to this research by investigating these task personality complementarities in the German labor market. So the main question of this paper is, are personality traits rewarded differently depending on the job task that the individual performs? There are different sources of research which are relevant in our paper. The literature on what affects wages is really immense. And we know, as I said, that wages are determined by several factors. On the one hand, on the side of the demand, the side of the jobs, on the one hand, the occupations, and on the supply side, the side of employees and their human capital and skills. In the task approach literature, with all of you will know that it is distinguished between so-called routine tasks and non-routine tasks. And the task approach assumes that because of automatization, the demand for so-called routine tasks declines because all these tasks are automated and thus replaced by programs, machines, etc. On the other hand, technology, computerization, leads to an increase in the productivity of analytical and interactive so-called non-routine tasks, and thus their demand for these tasks increase, and typically also wages for these tasks are increasing. What we see is that these tasks not only differ between occupations, but also within occupations, and that these differences are systematic. There's a first study from Orter and Handel from 2013 on the US labor market, where they show that higher educated individuals typically select into analytic or non-routine abstract tasks, that typically females select into interactive tasks, and that these differences also are relevant for wages. For Germany, Cassidy has shown similar results with older employment surveys, and in a more recent study, I replicated the main findings with newer data for Germany as well. Another strand of literature focused on personality traits and shows that personality traits also are related to wages. In this context, the big 5 personality traits are mainly the most popular taxonomy for measuring individuals' personality, but there are numerous other concepts of how personality is captured and how these facets or traits relate to wages. This is a increasing literature, which is not summarized in this presentation. But what is said in the beginning, we know that wage determination involves a complex interplay of both demand and supply factors, and there are very small number of studies who looked at whether personality traits are also correlated with job task, with selection into task, and whether personality and task in their combination lead to different wages. We summarize these studies in the paper, but we conclude that either these studies only cover a reduced number of personality traits. For example, they focus on one trait, such as social skill, or they use aggregated task information at the occupational level. But our argument is that if we want to look at complementarities, we have to go to the individual level to have the individual task profile of the person and their personality, the personality profile. Our main hypothesis or my main idea is that specific combinations between personality traits and job tasks might generate positive wage returns. To test this hypothesis, we use data from the personality traits and employment survey, which is a follow-up survey to the latest employment survey in Germany. This data set has already been published. You find the DOE of this data set here. You can have access to it as a scientific use file. In this study, we interviewed around 8,000 persons from the employment survey on their personality traits and other variables. So by the interview number, both interviews can be linked. So we have the information from the employment survey, which includes information on the job task. And on the other hand, we have several personality measures of the respondents. The study population are employed individuals, age 15 and over, with a regular working time of at least 10 hours per week. This is the core employment concept of the German employment survey. The analyses are based on a complete case sample, so individuals with complete information on all variables of interest, and 36 two-digit occupations in the German classification of occupations. This classification is from 2010 on very, very similar to the ISCO classification. It has also a horizontal level and a vertical level, depicting the complexity of the occupation. The final sample size is, as you see here, around 7,600 employees. The results that we will present in the paper have the gross hourly wages as the dependent variable, and the two main groups of variables are the personality factors on the one hand and the job tasks on the other hand. The big 5 personality factors were collected by the Big 5 inventory short version scale, which is a scale that has 3 items per dimension, and it's more or less simply the average score across the 3 items, which then depicts the level of openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and emotional stability of the employees. I'm not sure how familiar you are with personality or Big Five. If you want, there is a slide in the appendix what is in these 5 dimensions and which items are behind these scales, so we can have a look at it if you want. The second group of or the second main important variable is the job task variable. And here we depict the main job task category. I will show it in the next slides. Yes, and to best control for bias, for other confounders, the models include a number of control variables, and probably the most important one among them is the occupational dummies. So we try to assess within occupation effects. So we control for 36 two-digit occupation dummies. Another, maybe another note, in the personality and employment data set, we also collected a measure of cognitive ability, which is not present in the employment survey. And our tests so far on this variable are that it really works well. So maybe if you plan to work with the employment survey, you might use this additional measure in your analyses as well. Employees' main task category. The idea is that, of course, we know a occupation or even a job is characterized by different types of tasks. It might be interesting to look at the main category. So what is the most dominant task category an employee performs? In a robustness section, we also present results for the whole set of tasks that the people perform, but the main analyses in this paper are based on this main task category. There are a number of advantages of this measure. The one is that we really can differentiate between the effects for different tasks, just because we look at each individual and its main task. And it's straightforward from the computerization side. We just compute the share each individual performs on each task category, and then pick up the category which has the highest working time share. This is a measure which was first introduced by Holger Alder in 2013 in a working paper. And the interpretation of a task share as a working time goes back to Antontic et al. In 2009. A matter of immense discussion and huge problems is the assignment of how the single tasks in the employment survey are assigned to the categories. So for those who might not know how tasks are surveyed in the employment survey, it's just that each individual is asked whether each of 18 single job tasks, such as buying, providing, selling, occurs in their work. And each individual can also state the frequency, if never, sometimes, or always he or she performs these tasks. And these tasks have not been collected to perfectly match to the task approach literature. The task approach literature came years later. So from the 1970s on, the employment surveys collect these tasks, and after the task approach has become important in the literature, researchers try to match these tasks to the task approach categories. This categorization is oriented towards the paper of Michael Thiemann and me, yeah, how the single tasks are assigned is depicted here in this picture. I see that Eva Jarosz has a question, so.
Thank you.
Please.
I usually don't ask a question during the presentation, but in here it's just to better understand, because I was wondering where would you put a profession such as archivist, which is sort of routine in many ways, I think. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, because I'm trying to picture, you know, how you were classifying. So what mm-hmm. popped into my mind is an archivist who is documenting, mm-hmm. gathering information, but it's, I would say, a routine job. They mm-hmm. have to follow guidelines. So how would you like code this in terms mm-hmm. of the main tasks?
The procedure is to assign single job tasks to these categories, and then look for each individual which of these categories amounts to the largest share in his or her working time. So we do not go by occupations, but by single tasks. What you can then look at is, of course, the task profile of archivists, and see whether by this procedure archivists have their main task as non-routine analytic. I do not know, to be honest. Possibly, I will look at it. It's a good question, but to make the picture more broader, in the 2013 paper, we did something like to check the external validity of these categorizations by correlating these tasks with other measures that indicate non-routineness, and especially with regard to the analytic and interactive dimensions, there were much less doubt in classifying these as non-routine, in contrast to the classification of routine activities. So a more general finding from these works which rely on older data was that the classification of these non-routine tasks works much better than the classification of routine tasks or routine items. Is this okay?
Yes, of course. I was just trying to understand, you know, if there might be some bias already at the level of classification, and I get that there might be, and it's systemic for some occupation. It might be more difficult to assign. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What you can do, and what we also did, is then look how large is the share of employees whose main task category is routine, non-routine, manual, interactive, analytic in this sample. And we see that interactive analytical tasks are the dominant ones. So just a small share of the labor force in Germany has a non-routine manual main task, and a share of around 12% has routine manual as their main task. And then, of course, you can look which are typical occupations within these employees, which occupations they typically perform. And you see that it's mainly the cleaning services where the main task is routine manual, and, for example, financial services, computer science, and the like, for example, whose main task is analytic. But in this paper, we leave this level of occupations. We just use the individual level variance in job tasks. So we just focus on whether the person, which main task the individual employee has. The analytic strategy, it's in principle a simple fixed effects regression model, a wage model with the individual wage as the dependent variable, the individual's main job task. This is this number here. So analytic, interactive, non-routine, manual, and routine tasks, whereas your routine task is our referent in the models. Then we have a vector of individuals' personality traits, the big five, and the possibly main interesting figure is the vector of the combination of the interaction of job tasks and personality traits, where we want to assess whether different tasks pay off differently depending on the personality traits of the employees. And then we have a number of, control variables, among them individual film sector and regional controls, and as I said, the occupational dummies. In the personality literature, of course, it is acknowledged that there might be possible feedback effects between wages and personality, that also wages or the performing of jobs affects personality by themselves. To a bit control of this, we use these age effect free personality variables as it is done in Heineck and Unger. It's just a regression of age on personality, and then using the residuals of these regressions instead of the original personality variables. Possibly you have further ideas how to deal with this endogeneity problem. Maybe we can discuss this later. Before we come to the multivariate results, we present it's just a bivariate table where we see the means and standard deviations of the standardized personality measures overall and across main tasks. And what you see is that there are some significant correlations between tasks and personality traits. For example, you see that openness is positively related to all non-routine categories, and extraversion is positively related to non-routine, manual, and interactive tasks. But slightly negatively to analytical tasks. These results maybe show that people who are more open have a higher probability to select into non-routine tasks. Similarly for extraversion, we did not focus on the selection issue in the paper, but these associations also hold in multivariate specifications. So let's probably come to the wage models. This is the model with just main effects, so no interactions between personality traits and tasks. This table only includes job tasks and personality traits, but it includes a number of control variables, which are also depicted below. So gender, marital status, qualification, labor market experience, etc. And also occupation dummies. First, what you see here is that job tasks matter for wages, even within occupations. This is a finding that has been shown for the US and also for Germany in several studies, and is also evident for the 2018 German employment data. And you see that these wage effects are quite substantial. So an employee whose main task is interactive or analytic task as compared to routine manual task earns an additional wage of around 6.5 or 6.7%. Controlling for qualification, labor market experience, labor market entry cohorts, cognitive ability, and the like. Second, you see that also personality traits affect wages within occupations and conditional object tasks. So the effects are compared to job tasks comparatively small. These are effects in 1 standard deviation. So a 1 standard deviation increase in emotional stability leads to an average wage effect of 1.4%. So it's smaller maybe than the effect of main tasks. Nevertheless, there are effects of personalities on wages within occupations and within job tasks. The main question of the paper, however, was whether there are interactions, so significant interaction effects. And we find only one significant interaction effect. And so we focus on this effect here. And it's a plot which shows you the predictive wages of workers whose main task is routine manual. These are this declining line here. And the predicted wages of analytic tasks out of the model with interaction effects. Over rising levels of openness. So in the middle, here are people with an average level of openness, and on the right side are people with very high level of openness, and on the left side with very low levels of openness. What you see is that openness pays off depending on whether the person is working mainly in analytic tasks or routine manual tasks. So especially we see that openness leads to wage declines for workers who perform routine manual tasks. We do not find any other significant interaction effects for the models with the whole sample. However, we did some robustness analyses. Maybe we can talk about these also shortly. One of these robustness analyses is to run the model separately for the genders, and then we also find another effect. But I would leave it for the discussion or more time to look at these robustness analyses. Yeah, it's the main finding that for this paper, that we see that job tasks are paid differently even within occupations. This holds also for personality traits, but most important that yeah, employees who are more open, that is more curious, more imaginative, more open to new ideas, these individuals earn in additional wage return in analytical tasks, or in contrast face a wage disadvantage in routine manual tasks. This might be important when we think that analytic tasks increase in their importance at our labor markets, and that the educational system then might need to strengthen skills which support these emerging or these tasks which are of increasing importance in the labor markets. Of course, the study has a number of limitations. It provides only descriptive findings, and more importantly, I think it cannot directly uncover the underlying mechanisms. So maybe Sabine might add here, because she thought about how this negative effect of openness for people who work in routine jobs can be explained, and it's maybe an effect of boredness, or of being too open, too aggressive in circumstances where to be very productive, you should be not so open and focused on just doing your routine work. So it would be very interesting to look on this possible mechanism which is behind this interactive effect. And of course, future studies could address this question in a causal analytical setting. It's mainly descriptive evidence which we present in this paper.